Today, I want to talk with you about how to overcome fear and self-doubt as an online health coach or an online practitioner growing your coaching business. Welcome back to another episode of #Winning. Uriel King here. If you're a human, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're running a business, you're going to go through an emotional roller coaster. And there are going to be many, many moments where you're like, what the F is going on? Or you're about to embark upon something new. Maybe you're going to hire a coach, invest in yourself, invest in your business, take the leap from your 9-to-5 job to doing something you dream of doing. And it's fearful and you start to doubt yourself. So I want to give you a couple pointers that have worked really well for me over the years that hopefully will serve you as well. So number one is to just acknowledge the fact that this is how you're feeling. Like, man, I'm scared out of my pants and there's some doubt. That's totally okay. Because listen, the first step to change is awareness. We don't need to be delusional, be like, no, I got all this stuff figured out. Like, just be okay with the fact that like, I don't have all the answers. I'm a little bit afraid. Cool. Acknowledge it. Right? Just be aware of it. Totally okay. Totally okay. Second thing is to understand where that comes from. Like, what's the root cause of the fear or self-doubt? In my experience, a lot of fear comes from a lack of preparation. So I remember playing soccer early on. And when I say early on, I mean like when I was like 10, 11, 12. And I would go into games and I was a goalkeeper and we get smoked like 10-0. And I remember some of my first games, I was fearful because I didn't have years of preparation leading into that. If you think of speaking on stage, a lot of people are afraid of speaking on stage. Why? Because they've not done a lot of it. So it's like, oh my God, this is like, what are people gonna think of me? We're focused on ourselves, we're not focused on service. So usually fear and self-doubt comes from a lack of preparation. In fact, the emotion of fear is a very, very good indicator that you're just not prepared. And that's great because every emotion it's almost like a warning sign on the dashboard of your car. So for instance, if you're driving your car and the oil thingamajig pops up on your dashboard, then you know you probably have low oil or you need an oil change. If the gas thing goes too low, the gas thing, that's the official word. If the gas thing goes too low, what does that mean? It means you actually have to fill up your car. So if you think of your emotions as those same type of feedback loops, when you feel fear, it simply means you're not prepared and that's it, right? So how do we prepare? How do we get through that? Well, one of my early coaches, Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach, he said, fear is wetting your pants. Courage is what you do with wet pants. So the key to moving through fear and self-doubt is the word moving through. So there's really no way of getting around this. So think about this, like you're at the base of a mountain and you want to get to the summit. And you're thinking to yourself, that's a good climb. I'm afraid. I've not done that before. I don't know how I'm going to adjust to the altitude, etc. But here's the thing to remember: is like there's no helicopters coming to pick you up. There's no helicopter coming to base camp, picking you up and taking you to the summit. There's only one way of going through this, is to go through it. To get to it, you have to go through it. There is no exception in any aspect of life. If you are afraid of riding a bike because you don't know how to ride a bike, i.e. lack of preparation, how do you learn how to ride a bike? By learning how to ride a bike. That's the only way to learn how to ride a bike. How do you become more proficient at public speaking and less fearful of it? The only way is to do it. And you can prepare, behind the scenes and imagine yourself in big rooms with lots of people. You can certainly do that and that can help, but you also have to do the thing you're afraid of. And so I think it's a really good reminder when you are afraid of something, that should prompt you to do the thing. Because if you want to get better and not be fearful of that, doing the thing that you're afraid of is going to help you not be afraid of the thing anymore. In psychology, there's a concept called successive approximation. So if I'm scared of spiders, which I was very, very afraid of spiders growing up, the best way to get through that is successive approximation. So for instance, if I saw a spider in the corner of my room, right? So let's just kind of like understand this. Acknowledge that, okay, I'm like, heart rate's going up. I'm a little bit afraid. All right, why am I afraid? Why am I afraid of this spider? That's an interesting concept to think about in the context. Like, is it that I'm not prepared to deal with the spider? A little bit different here. I want to logically think through this. I'm literally I'm across the room and there's a spider on my wall. Why am I fearful of the spider? It's this big or this small, and I'm like this big. I'm logically thinking through this. Does this make logical sense that this tiny spider should be evoking this type of response in my body? Probably not. Is it poisonous? No. Okay, so what's the worst case scenario? Like, I don't like the fact that it runs around like this. So what I'm doing is I'm logically just breaking down the irrational response that my body is having to this tiny little thing. So that's kind of where I'm starting. Then, in terms of this whole concept of courage, what I'm trying to think about is how can I take small, courageous steps? So in this instance of the spider, all I'm doing is I'm going to take one step forward. Successive approximation. And I stand there and I just recognize that I didn't die. Everything's fine. The spider didn't jump at me. Okay, cool. I take a couple breaths. I take one more step closer and I stand there and I recognize that everything's fine. And then I just keep doing that over and over again until the point where I'm literally this far away from the spider and I realize it's fine. And so this is one of the most effective ways at facing our fears is to get closer to them. If you're afraid of talking to someone, like if you have like this girl or guy, you're like, oh my God, I'd love to ask them out. The best way to get comfortable asking them out is just to like ask them out. You'll realize that they're just as afraid as you are with other things. Like they're not up here, you're not down here. We all have our own shit. So successive approximation, I've been able to use very effectively in my life. And this is also something I'm hoping like teaching my kids, because one of my kids, Luca, he's really afraid of spiders. So I'm like, hey, buddy, just like stand a meter away from the wall. He's like, no. I'm like, so I'm trying to walk him through this. I'm like, what's the worst case scenario here? Is the spider going to jump off the wall at you? All I'm asking you to do is don't worry about killing it. That's fine. I'll take care of that. All I'm asking you to do is be in the same room with the spider. And that's going to take, it's going to take him some time and some reps to go through that. But we can't overcome the fear without addressing the fear. Again, the only way to it is to go through it. There's no and, ifs, or buts around this. Now, the thing about courage is that it doesn't feel good, right? We all want the other side of this, which is confidence. Confidence feels good. Confidence is like, oh, I've done this a million times. Well, when you feel like that, you're not using courage. Courage doesn't feel good. Courage has that trepidation. It has, like the armpit sweats, however your body responds, that fight or flight type of response. That's when you know you're using courage. And to be honest, that is a feeling you want to be feeling on a daily basis. Not 24/7 necessarily, but at some point, because if you only do things you feel comfortable with, then you will lead a very uncomfortable life. There's a concept called comfort creep. And what that means is we allow comfort to creep into our life and we become very comfortable with it. So we become comfortable being comfortable. And that's very dangerous because the further we go in that direction, the less likely we are to use courage to go back through things that might feel uncomfortable. Dealing with the spider, having a hard conversation that will take 5 minutes instead of deliberating on it and procrastinating on it for years. And so when we recognize that a lot of times the things that we're afraid of are actually not that bad. And if we just face it head on, it's going to take us a couple moments and then it's done. And then we're like, shit, you know what? It wasn't that bad. And then what does that do? That builds your confidence muscle. So the next time you're faced with the same situation, you have a reference point. Hey, remember when I took care of that yesterday? I can probably do this again. So for me personally, having hard conversations is something I've done a very good job at avoiding for a lot of my life until I realized how important it was to grow a successful business. So my first business, I would avoid hard conversations. I didn't want to ruffle feathers. I wanted to be liked. And I compromised the standards of performance because of that. In our current business, it's like immediate. If I see something I don't like, I'm giving someone feedback immediately. And I'm having a hard conversation with them as soon as humanly possible, because instead of letting someone or something just expand and fester for weeks or months, I'm addressing it within like an hour. And that's not something I am naturally excited about doing. Even to this day, I'm like, oh, fuck. But I have to think through. I have to reframe. Here's why this is so important. Here's why I'm doing this. Here's how this is going to help this person. Or here's how this is going to help the company. And when I take a moment to think through things logically, it allows me to move forward, because fear is an emotion. And one of the easiest ways, or most effective ways, I should say, of dealing with emotions is with logic. Because we are emotional beings. Like, we make decisions with emotion and we justify them with logic. So if I'm like, oh, I'm afraid of this thing, it's like, okay, logically, does this make sense? Right? For instance, for people that are afraid of flying, one of the most important and powerful ways to get over that is actually fly the plane. And you can take flying lessons with an instructor in a tiny 2-seater plane, and you can take the controls and you'll realize, holy shit, this is actually very safe. And the only way something bad is going to happen is if a wing falls off the plane. So the reason, for instance, if we think about why people have trepidation around flying sometimes, is because number one, they're not in control. So they have no control over the situation. So that's an interesting thing to work on. And then two, just logically, just like look at the math on this. What is the statistically, how many airports, big airports, like just take every major city around the world. All right, that's a lot of them. How many flights in and out every single day? And you can search this up online, and it's going to be in the hundreds of thousands. And then relate that to the number of accidents. And it's so insignificant. When you compare that to driving a car, you should be scared out of your pants about driving a car. Like, the number of accidents that happen in cars relative to airplanes is like 1,000,000 to 1. But because we are irrational, we think that a plane crash is so much more dramatic, falling 30,000 feet out of the sky, as opposed to running into a tree with a car. It's so much more dramatic, and it triggers that emotional, irrational, fear-based response. So if we think about things logically, we can move through the fear a lot more courageously. The fourth thing to consider here is just, once again, being in a community or having a mentor who you are accountable to. And I think this is one of the most important things you can do is, like, I work out with a trainer twice a week. And the reason I do that is not because I'm scared of working out. It's because that I know when I work out on my own, which I still do every day, I don't push myself to the same extent that I would with my trainer, because I'm comfortable. 8 reps is good enough. No, 2 more, right? I'm a little bit tired. No, keep going for 1 more minute. So this is the difference. This is the difference, and this is why trainers will always produce better results with their clients than if the client works out on their own. And it's the same reason why in business, you will get way better results working with a business coach who knows what they're doing, because they will hold you to a higher standard. They will hold you to tighter deadlines, and they will push you forward when you have these moments of self-doubt and fear. If a client says to me, or if I'm talking to the client and I'm asking them, what's the deadline for getting this thing going? And they're like, well, like probably a month out. I'm like, awesome. You've got 2 weeks. And they're like, well, I'm like, hear me out, okay? You're paying me to help you go faster. So if I allow you to determine your goals, that's what got you here in the first place. So let's talk about how we can cut that deadline in half, because you can do it. We just have to shift a few things around, including your mindset. So if I can help someone move faster, then I'm going to move them closer to their goals than they would on their own. And this is why having a mentor is so powerful for helping us move through fear and self-doubt and procrastination and all the other bullshit that comes up on our own. Isolation kills, community heals. So being part of a community of other like-minded individuals is going to push you further ahead, because again, you want to be like the tribe, right? And you will become a reflection of your peer group. So if you're around a coach, a mentor, someone who's already been where you want to go, if you're surrounded by other friends or colleagues who are further ahead, that's naturally going to push you through, because you're like, shit, okay, they're doing it. I guess I can go as well. And so sometimes one of the most effective ways to change your behavior is to change your environment. And when I say change your environment, I don't mean your physical location, although that's fine as well. It's to change the environment of people you're surrounded by, because they will show you the level that they're playing at, and you'll want to meet that standard, just being a social being and being part of this tribe and being accepted as part of that tribe. And the final thing I'll mention here is just understand that a growth-oriented life is littered with discomfort. If you want to live an easy life, it's going to be very hard. If you're willing to do hard things, your life will become a lot easier. If you think about working out is hard. Like, you have to challenge your muscles, you have to lift heavy weights, you have to huff and puff. But what's on the other side of that? What's on the other side of that is a life where you have more strength, more vitality, and more energy, you have more endurance. You're able to walk up a flight of stairs. When you're 95 years old, you can open up a jar, right? The quality of your life becomes so much better because you were willing to move through discomfort. You were willing to use courage and move and challenge yourself. So whether we're talking about getting closer to a spider, having a hard conversation, getting in those couple workouts, lifting a little bit heavier weights, investing in something that's good for you, all of these things are uncomfortable and are going to invoke some type of fear. But the only way you get better is by committing to moving through it. And if you're somebody who is growth oriented as one of your core values, you can't be comfortable because you can't grow and be comfortable at the same time. So my hope for you is this. There's probably something in your life right now. I want you to think about it. There's one thing. It's a decision you're trying to make. It's something you want to do. There's something that's been on your list for a moment, but for some reason you haven't pulled the trigger. And I want you to look at that one thing and just say, fuck it, I'm going to do it. Because if you do something that scares you every day, you're going to live a pretty amazing life. And in my experience, not that I've died, but you will look back on your life, not on the things that you did and regretted, but it's the things you didn't do that you said you would have done. And I think that's a really sad life to live, is to live one of regrets where you're like, oh yeah, I remember that time I said I was going to do that thing and I didn't do it. Don't be that person, right? Actually do things, challenge yourself. Who cares what happens, right? Good or bad, it doesn't matter. It's all good. You're going to learn, you're going to grow, new doors will open. But none of that's going to happen if you just stay where you are and you play safe. So hopefully this message has resonated with you. If you're someone who's currently going through fear, self-doubt, we all do. We all will continue to do so as being part of this, amazing human experience. I'd love to know in the comments below which one of these pointers has been most helpful for you. If you've enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to the channel. We've got hundreds of other videos to help you become the amazing entrepreneur that you need to be to spread your message to more people, to live an amazing quality of life, and to impact more lives. So thank you so much, guys. Hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next video. So how do you stay motivated when you're not seeing results? I'm going to share my process with you in this video, and I think if you're a little bit stuck in your business, in your journey, this will make a huge difference for you.